A rabbi and a millennial walk into a web series. The rabbi turns to the millennial and asks, "What inspires you?" And the millennial says, "I am so glad you asked." In a world filled with small talk, we're all about the smart talks. Join the conversation.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the SmarTalks show. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's so exciting. We finally, 4 episodes is a milestone. It's like a month. This is amazing.
It's a long time. We're committed. It's a big deal.
Consistency, that's the most important thing. If we can get it out consistent and really put out a message and really engage with you guys, our community really appreciate all the comments and likes and shares. It's really, really nice. We really see the appreciation.
Absolutely. And community does take time to build. So let's keep doing this together. This is our journey. We can't do it alone. And we wouldn't want to.
That's right. Thank you so much, Becky. That's so important. We at SmarTalks, we're trying to build a community of young Jews so that they can connect online through knowledge, relevant content, Jewish values, and Jewish text. And so over the past couple weeks, we've really seen this community come together with likes and shares and comments, and we love the discussions. Thank you so much.
Totally. And by the way, I want to give a big thank you to you, Rabbi Zalman Kravitz. SmarTalks is amazing. I think you're really utilizing this window in time, this digital age, in a way that's positive. It doesn't have value of its own. It's how we use it. Some people want to post all kinds of madness, and we want to post all kinds of, magic. So I think it's all about how we use the tools that we're given. And I love that you're setting such a great example and giving me and other millennials, Gen Z, anybody, other people, other seekers, other wisdom students, an opportunity to engage with social and digital media in a way that's meaningful.
Thank you. And Becky, really, it's great having you as a partner, having you as the other voice, the voice of the millennial. It's really, really amazing to have that back and forth, and I really appreciate it. Last week we had an amazing discussion about active listening, attentive listening, and really mindfulness, and really being present in the moment and hearing what the other person has to say. And we started to talk about some of the message that we're going to discuss today, which is the idea of, as it says in the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, arichat sifasei tzayim, which means by order of the lips, which what does that mean, ordering of the lips? Meaning verbalization, communicating, talking, and really powerfully sharing what is important. By audibly pronouncing and saying knowledge or repeating what you just learned and sharing it, it helps you really understand what you just learned or what you just heard. And I think that that's a tremendous important value, but I think that speech is also such a powerful metaphor and connection point.
There is something to be said about words and the words that we use, but also taking wisdom that we've learned and verbalizing it again. And it's not easy. Words, sometimes we're like at a loss for words, and sometimes we feel like we don't have the proper words, or that words are limiting. They don't really properly convey what we want to say, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are very important. So I'm really excited that we're delving into this topic today.
If we look even to the beginning of creation, we see that God used the metaphor of speech for the creation of the world. That's powerful. There's something important in that lesson of why use speech, why not use molding or etched or so many different types of creation and uses of creativity to create. Why use speech?
Right. Why?
So it's very interesting. One of the different interesting things about speech is that speech only exists while the person is speaking those words.
Interesting.
And so when God created the world, just as speech only exists as God spoke it, so too the world only exists as God creates it. There's a profound story that a bunch of philosophers were debating. How would God destroy the world? And one philosopher said God would bring floods. Another philosopher said God would give storms and create an avalanche and create a volcano that would completely decimate everything, or an asteroid would come and destroy the world, like destroy the dinosaurs or whatever it is. And this little rabbi gets up and he says, you know how God would destroy the world? God would destroy the world by ceasing to create it.
Yeah. Yeah. But what does that look like? What is that in practicality? Because a lot of millennials and a lot of our audience out there is like, who is God? What is God? God is some mystical man in the clouds that's like, puppeteering. So what does that mean?
Becky, I'm glad you asked about that. How, what is God and how does God and what does this mean and what does this metaphor of speech have to do with anything and what does it have to do with me? Because the idea of speech and God's creation through speech is that God doesn't just play a back role where he retired after God created the world, but God has an active role, just as speech continues to exist only as I'm saying it. God's involvement in the world is constant. Even today, even now, not just when God created. And so the idea of God is not just this old man in the sky who is retired and sitting up and sort of saying do or don't, but the idea of God is something that is relevant today and here and now. And often, if we take a step back and we're open to it, we can see tremendous divine providence in the way things happen, in the nuances of occurrences that happen, that help us really understand that it's too incidental or too timed or too perfect for these things to just be happenstance, but it's really something that is in the moment that it has happened, and that it's more than just a coincidence, but it's something divine.
You were just pointing to those moments of, whoa, so you're saying that this is not a coincidence. Those moments where we tap into something bigger at play is really God creating or co-creating through our experience.
Exactly. And it's a question of, divine providence is so deep, it's so in our lives, and it's a question of what we do with it or how we recognize it.
It's amazing.
So I think that's an important thing, an important lesson of the idea of speech and the constant of speech, and the idea that even when you say something or even type something on social, that it has forever impact across you and other people's lives. And it has like an everlasting effect. It has a ripple effect. I think that's also an important idea of the power of speech.
Absolutely, and the responsibility of speech. I remember being told years back that words are things. In a way, they carry energy. And not everyone really resonates with this whole, we're energy particles, but that's also the science of what we are. We're made up of atoms, and it is energy. And so everything that we do, there is that cause and effect, and having a real sense of responsibility in the words we choose, the words we put out there. Again, the extension of our brands on social and day-to-day life, that's huge, and it's in our control.
It reminds me of an interesting story of the Baal Shem Tov, one of the great Hasidic masters, the founder of the Hasidic movement. They tell a story that once, while the Baal Shem Tov was walking into the synagogue, he heard someone shouting at his friend and telling him that he's going to rip them apart like they cut a fish. I'm going to fillet you like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov was very disturbed by the imagery of that conversation. So he asked all his pupils to gather around in a circle, like he often did, and they put their arms on each other's shoulders, and they'll close their eyes in meditation. And as they lifted into this trance, and their souls sort of lifted up, rose above into the heavens, all of a sudden they started screaming, oh my gosh, what's going on? How is this? And what they saw was this person actually dismembering this other person metaphorically, like the person that pulls out the bones of a fish. And there's profound lessons in that idea that, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That's totally wrong. Names do hurt me. Names are hurtful. Words are hurtful. And, seeing something from another person's mindset is critical. And the words that we use and how we term things are so important that we need to understand that the way we say something can either make or break someone. Whether it's a teacher or a parent or a friend, how we instruct someone or how we talk to someone, whether it's in positive or negative terms, or whether it's in constructive or deconstructive ways, those words can literally be like tearing that person's soul in the insides. And I think that we owe it to ourselves that when we are talking, that we understand the power and the ripple effect that comes from our words.
It's also interesting, there's this odd paradox that exists, because we're talking about speech and how really words only last for as long as we're saying them. So there's this like thinking that, oh, it's whatever. Like I just threw it out there and it's not going to last. But at the same time, there's this other flip side of the fact that, yeah, but while the word itself didn't last, the repercussions are everlasting. And so to our, naked eye, and especially now where it's so easy to just type exactly a text message or a tweet, or a Facebook post, that we think that it's casual. But on some other dimension, really, it's everlasting. And also in this physical plane, it's everlasting. I was bullied as a kid. I had a Hebrew name. I have a Hebrew name still, but I went by it. Becky is a name that I chose when we moved to the States. And my Hebrew name is Tahel, which is a beautiful Hebrew name that means to bring light, to praise the Creator. And I just didn't know any better. When we moved to the States, I started getting bullied for having this different name. And I remember just not understanding why that felt so bad and the pain that felt. And I know I'm not the only person that's ever been bullied, and I'm sure people have had it way worse than I did, but even that little bit lasted forever. So much so that I chose a different name, which led me on a completely different trajectory. And only now, later in life, am I really healing some of that early stuff that was done. Again, not necessarily intentionally. We were all kids and we make mistakes, and we didn't know better, but words certainly do have impact. And while it's just a momentary blip, potentially, it really is in actuality a lifelong effect that you could be having on somebody. So I always just, not as a victim, but I use that as an opportunity for myself to build my own sense of responsibility with the words I choose and the actions I take, because there's an effect.
Becky, I want to commend you. That was very courageous and very brave to be able to, this is like live TV in a sense that, we're taking these messages and streaming them live and sharing them with the world. And it can be a very, you make yourself vulnerable by actually sharing these personal stories. And the whole idea of what being different, not feeling comfortable, kids teasing each other. I experienced it myself as a kid. I moved schools halfway through elementary school, and I remember how hard it was I was different, and it wasn't the same, and just getting used to the way I say something. Even in the Jewish community, there are different ways of pronouncing Hebrew. And, as little kids, fourth graders, fifth graders, you say an oi or an ah, that could be fodder for someone to tease someone or bully someone. And it's not necessarily the big things, but it's the small things. And it's brave to be able to communicate that. And I really think that, one of our goals of this show is to really create that safe space where people do feel comfortable sharing those types of experiences. And I really appreciate that you shared that. Wow.
Well, of course, and thank you for creating the space where I can. I think there's probably, and I sense that there are people watching who have had their fair share of experiences where someone said something, and while the person saying that specific word might not have intended for it to hurt or cut as deep as it did, it's a personal experience, and we all take things on, and we all have our own battles to be fought. And I'd love to hear, from you guys out there, if there's something that you can relate in terms of your own life, any sort of moment where language was used against you, and also maybe where it was used in a way that was so powerful, it was just like one word and it made your entire day that much better. I think it shows that duality of words. we're not saying that you have to, shed tears all over the comments, but we do want to leave that open for you as well, because I think vulnerability is some of the most incredible points of connection, that when we can be vulnerable and authentic, we're not perfect. If we can really shine a light on those areas, we can really connect and work through stuff and heal together.
Right, exactly. And I think you brought up a really, really important idea, is that words have both positive and negative. That at the same time we're focusing, for 1 second, we're focusing on the negative effects of words, we can also focus on the positives of words. And I remember, I may have told you this once, that once when I was like in 4th grade, a principal came up to me and she said, Kravitz, don't ever stop smiling. And I think that really felt good as a young kid. Don't stop smiling, be happy. It's really something that is a profound message.
Huge. We have to give praise to each other. Those things last forever, and you never know whose day you're going to make brighter and who you're going to build towards their purpose and dreams. And really, we have to fight for each other. We have to really support each other, because it's that little bit of extra strengthening that can be the make or break for someone's entire dream. And that's huge.
Absolutely. One of the things I was thinking that would be a good thing to have a discussion with our audience and really share was, how do you formulate your communication? And when you're public speaking and you're going out into the world, and you have to really, what are all the different elements that help you put together an amazing speech, an amazing tools for communication? So I'd like to quickly go through 7 public speaking fundamentals, because I think that this could be applied not only to public speaking, but also to a broad spectrum of things when you're communicating with people at work, at home, or whatever it is. You ready, Becky?
I'm so ready. This is huge. Let's do it.
Awesome. So the first one is look the part. Dress for success. I.e., when you're ready, create that environment in yourself. If you're public speaking in a professional standpoint, get dressed. Put on a suit, or people wear hoodies and jeans. If that's how they do it in Silicon Valley, go for it. But dress for your success and really be the part, live the part. Tip 2, pace yourself. Don't go too fast, don't go too slow. Give your words the time to make its impact. 3, avoid filter words like and do it all the time. The next tip. The 4th tip, which is look at your audience and watch their body language. Look at their eyes, because you can see the truth in what you're saying, or whether it's really resonating by looking at their body movements, their body language, and their eyes. Are they paying attention? Are they following you? The next step is engage with your audience. If your audience is interacting or not interacting, move with the flow. Maybe tell a story, maybe tell a joke, maybe go have sort of different paths that you can go with your communication, so that if you see that your audience is not engaging, that you can pivot a little bit and find your path in a way that will talk to them. Because in reality, when you're communicating, you're not just communicating what you need to share, but you're also communicating to your audience. And it needs to be what they need to hear and what their interests and passions are. So work with understanding your audience to be able to engage your audience. The next tip, use your gestures, use your hands, use your body, come closer, go move around from direction to direction, so that it's a dynamic conversation with your audience. It's almost like a dance. And the last tip, the 7th tip, is practice. Practice, practice, practice.
I did my fair share of public speaking training, and as an actress, you rehearse and you memorize lines. But as an improv actress, and I did a lot of improv growing up in sketch comedy, while you have an idea, you kind of also allow for stuff to come to you, to be inspired in the moment, which is actually really spiritual. There's an interesting moment of, really connecting to Hashem, to God, to the creative energy, to source, and being open. And I think that also goes back to this whole active listening, to always learning from it almost unifies everything we're talking about, is because you're listening to yourself, you're listening to the universe, you're listening to your partners that you're in a scene with, you're listening to the audience, and you're being open. You're not so closed off. You're okay to ad lib a little bit. You're okay to maybe have to take a sharper right in the conversation at, the expense of your own agenda, but to serve the audience and to serve your scene partner. So it's really collaborative. It becomes less of a control freak fear of looking bad, and it becomes more open and loving and nurturing and community focused, which sounds, to me, in my experience, also very Jewish and very aligned with the values that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks.
Right, absolutely. And I think that it goes back to our original ideas, is that, articulate speech, understanding your audience, understanding the positive and negative impact of your speech, create on both sides, both on the audience and on the person communicating, that safe space to be able to say what you need to say. And if you know that that's a safe space, so whether you mess up or you do a good job, it doesn't matter. People understand the intention of what is going on.
They feel you. I feel like these tips were also just helpful tips and tools to get your energy right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Becky, for being an important part of this conversation. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. Please leave your comments below. In the link below, we have our 7 public speaking fundamentals and a practice worksheet to help you practice your write down your big idea and figure out ways to communicate it. So we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing another important value and experience next week.
That was awesome, and I can't wait to put these 7 tips and also what everyone in the audience